My sister cheated with my fiance on engagement day and my family supported her. So, I'm 28 now, and not too long ago, my dad, Frank, calls me out of nowhere. We haven't spoken in like 6 years. Yeah, it's been that long. Honestly, I didn't think I'd ever hear from him again. But when I picked up, he sounded pretty desperate. And I mean desperate, desperate. The kind of voice you use when you're in deep trouble and don't know who else to call. Now, here's the thing. I wasn't ready for what he was about to drop on me. He goes on to tell me that my younger sister Lisa and her husband Brad are in some serious financial crisis. Apparently, they've dug themselves into this huge hole, and now they're looking for someone to pull them out of it. And guess who he thinks should help? Yeah, me. The same sister who betrayed me years ago, and the same guy who was supposed to be my fiance. Before I get into all the recent drama, let me rewind a bit so you get the full picture. This crap storm didn't just pop out of nowhere. See, Lisa's 26 now, and we've never been super close, like, we weren't at each other's throats or anything growing up, but we were just kind of distant. She was always a little sneaky, always looking for a way to get ahead, but I never thought she'd go as far as stabbing me in the back the way she did. I guess I should have seen the signs sooner, but hindsight, right? Brad, the guy I was going to marry, was everything I thought I wanted. We met in college. Typical stuff, you know? We were together for 5 years. 5 freaking years. That's a long time to be with someone. And by that point, I thought we were solid. He proposed, and I was over the moon, like I was sure I'd found my person. We planned this whole engagement party, and it was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Now here's where it all goes to hell. That night, everyone's celebrating, laughing, drinking, all that good stuff. I remember feeling like the luckiest person in the world. I mean, how often do you get a night like that where everything just feels right? Well, apparently not as often as you think. Around 10 p.m., I stepped outside to take a call, right? I needed better reception, so I wandered out to the backyard. It's dark, but the string lights were still on, and I'm walking around trying to get some signal when I see them. Lisa and Brad, together. Not just together, but, like, really together. Kissing. Like they didn't give a damn who saw. It's funny, because for a second I just stood there, frozen. My brain couldn't catch up to what my eyes were seeing, like, this couldn't be real, right? I mean, who does that? And on the night of your freaking engagement party, it felt like time just stopped. They didn't notice me at first, which was wild. I was standing there just a few feet away, and they were so into it, they didn't even know I was watching. When they finally saw me, their faces dropped. They stopped kissing, obviously, but it was way too late. I didn't say anything. I just turned around and bolted. I don't know how I made it to my car without completely breaking down, but I did. I sped off to the nearest hotel, checked in, and just collapsed on the bed. I couldn't even cry at first. It was like my body was too stunned to react. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that there had to be some kind of explanation, but deep down, I knew what I saw was exactly what it looked like. Lisa and Brad were screwing behind my back. I was just lying there, staring at the ceiling, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. I almost didn't want to look, but curiosity got the better of me. She said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. I'm in love with Brad. We've been seeing each other for a while." I don't know why, but reading it somehow hurt worse than seeing it. Like, there was something about seeing those words written out that made it feel so much more final. She went on to say how she didn't mean to hurt me, but she couldn't help how she felt and blah, blah, blah. Honestly, at that moment, I wasn't even mad. I was just numb. Too numb to feel anything. I couldn't process it yet. Then Brad texted me. He said he was sorry too, but then he added that he had proposed to me because he thought it would make his feelings for Lisa go away. Like, what kind of twisted logic is that? He thought marrying me would somehow help him stop thinking about her. It made me feel like I was just a placeholder. Like he was just using me until he figured out how to be with Lisa. That was the moment where everything really hit me, how badly I'd been played. I stayed in that hotel for like 3 days, not talking to anyone, just trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. When I finally went back home to get my stuff, I wasn't prepared for what I walked into. I thought the house would be empty. Instead, everyone was there. My dad, my stepmom, and Lisa. Even Brad was there. It was like they were all waiting for me. Now, normally when you've just been royally screwed over, you'd expect some sort of apology, right? But no. The second I walked in, they all acted like nothing happened. Lisa came up to me with tears in her eyes and hugged me like I was supposed to feel sorry for her. Brad stood in the back, looking awkward as hell, but no one said anything. No one apologized. I told them I was just there to pack my things and leave. That's when Brad spoke up, saying he was moving in with Lisa now that everything was out in the open. My dad and stepmom didn't seem fazed. In fact, they looked happy. My own family was happy that my sister had stolen my fiance and that I was out of the picture. I asked them straight up why they were smiling. Like, what the hell was so funny? My dad, of all people, had the nerve to tell me that we can't change what happened and that it was better to just accept it and move on. Move on? Really? My sister stole my life and I'm just supposed to be okay with it? I felt like I was in some twisted nightmare where everyone around me was insane, and I was the only one seeing how messed up it was. Lisa apologized in her half-assed way, saying she couldn't help falling in love with Brad, and they were meant to be together. I was so done. I packed up my stuff, told them all to go to hell, and walked out of that house for the last time. All right, so after I packed my stuff and left my family behind, I decided to cut them all off completely. It wasn't some dramatic decision. It was more like, I'm done. I'm not dealing with this anymore. I changed my number, blocked them on everything, texts, social media, all of it. I didn't want any more fake apologies or awkward messages from Lisa or Brad or, honestly, anyone else in my family. For the next few months, I felt like I could finally breathe. I wasn't waking up every day wondering if I was going to get hit with some new drama or have to deal with the fact that my own family picked my sister over me. I focused on work, built up some savings, got a new apartment, and just moved on. And honestly, life was good. No, scratch that, life was great. I didn't have to think about them. They weren't a part of my world anymore. But of course, things can't stay peaceful forever, right? So 5 years later, yep, 5 years of total silence from my family, I get this phone call. It's from a number I don't recognize, and at first I think, no way I'm answering this. But for some reason, I pick up, and guess who's on the other line? My dad, Frank. I don't even know how he got my number. Must have pulled some serious detective work to get it because I made sure they couldn't find me. I think about hanging up right there, but something in his voice makes me pause. He sounds, well, not like the strong, authoritative dad I remember. He sounds beaten down, like he's at the end of his rope. I stay on the line just to hear what he's got to say, and that's when he drops the big one on me. Turns out, Lisa and Brad, yeah, the golden couple who everyone defended back then, are in deep trouble. They're flat broke. Apparently, they started this business a few years ago trying to be entrepreneurs or whatever. You know, selling stuff online or some nonsense. Anyway, the whole thing tanked. Their investors pulled out, they're swimming in debt, and now they've sold almost everything they own. According to Dad, they're basically one step away from being homeless. Here's the kicker. Wait, I'm not supposed to say that. Dad's calling me because they need money. Yeah, you heard that right. After everything that happened, after all the betrayal and drama, they want me to bail them out. At first, I'm just sitting there, stunned. I can't believe what I'm hearing. My family hasn't talked to me in years, not since the day I walked out. And now, out of nowhere, they're asking for $75,000. $75,000? Like, where do they think I'm getting that kind of money? Do they think I've just been sitting around hoarding cash all these years? It's absolutely insane. I ask Dad straight up, why are you coming to me for this? Why don't they ask their friends or someone else in the family? And that's when he tells me that they've already tried. Apparently, everyone else is either tapped out or not willing to drain their savings to help. Even Brad's family, who always had their back, won't touch this mess. So naturally, they figured, hey, let's call the person we screwed over and ask her to save us. What's even crazier is that Lisa and Brad didn't want Dad to call me. According to him, Lisa was too embarrassed to ask me directly. They thought I'd never agree, which, spoiler alert, they were 100% right about. But Dad, being Dad, figured it was worth a shot anyway. He tried to guilt trip me, saying stuff like, they've learned their lesson, and they're family after all. I gotta admit, part of me wanted to laugh. Like, really? Now they're family? When it suits them, huh? When they need me, suddenly I'm important again. I told Dad I wasn't interested, that there was no way I was giving them that kind of money. I mean, I had to scrape and claw my way up after they all abandoned me. There was no way I was about to just hand over everything I'd worked for. Dad wasn't happy with that answer. He started getting all emotional, saying how Lisa and Brad were at rock bottom, and if I didn't help, things were going to get really bad for them. He said they'd lose their house, their business was already gone, and they were even struggling to put food on the table. But here's the thing. None of that moved me. I didn't feel sorry for them. It's like, you made your bed, now lie in it. You think you can betray someone, wreck their life, and then, years later, expect them to just swoop in and save you? Nope, not happening. I told Dad again that I wasn't helping, and that's when he lost it. He starts calling me selfish, saying I've become cruel and bitter, and that I'm letting my grudge tear the family apart. It was wild. Like, I'm the one tearing the family apart? After everything they did? I told him straight up that I wasn't going to be guilted into anything. I wasn't going to feel bad for protecting myself after the way they all treated me. I reminded him how everyone had taken Lisa's side, how they all stood by while she destroyed my engagement and stole my future. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, but he didn't say anything. The call ended with him just kind of muttering, "I hope you don't regret this," and then hanging up. It felt like such a weak threat, like he was still trying to make me feel like I was in the wrong. But here's the thing. After I hung up, I didn't feel any guilt. I felt relief, like this was the final nail in the coffin. I knew for sure that I didn't need these people in my life anymore, and if they were struggling now, that was on them. Over the next few days, I started getting these guilt-ridden text messages from Dad. I'm talking nonstop. He was blowing up my phone with messages like, "You're still my daughter. I know you'll do the right thing," and "Lisa made mistakes, but we all have." It was like he was trying every angle to get me to cave. I even got a few from my stepmom, Julie, telling me how heartbroken she was and how she couldn't believe I was acting like this. I didn't respond to any of them. I just blocked their numbers. I had already made my decision, and no amount of guilt or manipulation was going to change that. They made their choices, and now they were dealing with the consequences. Honestly, cutting them off again was probably the best thing I could have done. It gave me peace, knowing I wasn't going to be dragged into their mess anymore. Let them figure it out. They made their bed. Now they can deal with it. A few days after I blocked my dad and stepmom, things finally felt like they were settling down again. I'd managed to push the whole ridiculous situation to the back of my mind. You know, I was focusing on work, hanging out with friends, getting back to my normal routine. I wasn't about to let their drama mess up my life again. But of course, just when you think things are quiet, that's when the chaos sneaks up on you. It was a Saturday, and I remember it so clearly because I'd just gotten back from grocery shopping and was looking forward to a chill afternoon. I had some music playing, was about to make lunch, and then my phone started buzzing. At first, I thought it might be one of those spam calls, so I ignored it. But then it buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my neighbor. Now, my neighbor, Sarah, is a sweet lady in her 60s who's lived next to me for years. We're not super close, but she's the kind of person who will bring you cookies around the holidays and tell you when your package gets left on her porch by mistake. So when I see her name pop up, I figured it must be something small. Maybe she needed help moving a plant or something. But her message was weird. It just said, "Are you home? There's a couple outside your house. They've been knocking and yelling for a while. I'm not sure if you know them, but it's starting to make me nervous." My stomach dropped immediately. I had a pretty good idea of who it was before I even looked out the window. Sure enough, when I peeked out, there they were. Lisa and Brad, standing on my front porch looking all kinds of pissed off. Lisa was pacing back and forth, and Brad was leaning against the door like he had nowhere better to be. I had this moment where I just froze. Part of me wanted to march out there and tell them to leave, but another part of me was like, hell no, I'm not getting involved with this. My first instinct was to call the police. I mean, they were on my property, causing a scene. But before I could even dial, Brad noticed me looking through the window. Great. Now that they knew I was home, I couldn't pretend I wasn't. Lisa started banging on the door harder, yelling, "We just want to talk!" Brad didn't say anything, but he was staring at me like I owed him something. The audacity of it made me sick to my stomach. I opened the door just a crack, enough to talk but not enough for them to push their way in. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as possible. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing how pissed I was. Lisa jumped in first, saying how I'd been ignoring everyone, and they needed to talk to me. She was practically shouting at this point, all worked up like she was the one who had been wronged. "You blocked us on everything. You didn't even let us explain," she said, her face red and frustrated. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Explain? Explain what exactly? How they'd both betrayed me, and then expected me to just hand over money when they messed up their own lives? "I don't need to hear your explanations," I said, keeping the door between us like a barrier. "I already know everything I need to know." Brad, who'd been quiet until now, suddenly chimed in. "We're family, all right? You can't just cut us out and act like we don't exist. We didn't come here to fight. We just need your help." I could feel my blood boiling. The nerve of this guy. He was the reason my life got flipped upside down in the first place, and now he was standing on my porch, talking about how I couldn't cut them off? What kind of reality were these people living in? "I can cut you off, and I did," I snapped. "Whatever you're here for, I'm not interested." But Lisa wouldn't let it go. She stepped forward like she was going to push her way in, and I instinctively pushed the door a little more closed. "It's not about what you want," she said, voice all high-pitched and desperate. We need your help. You don't get it. We're in serious trouble. If you don't help us, we could lose everything. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. She looked worn out, like someone who hadn't slept in days. But then I remembered why they were here, why I was even in this position, and any sympathy I felt vanished. That's not my problem, I said firmly. You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. I don't owe you anything. Lisa's face twisted into this mix of anger and disbelief. She looked like she was about to cry, but it wasn't the kind of tears you feel bad for. It was more like frustration tears, like she couldn't believe I wasn't giving her what she wanted. Brad, on the other hand, wasn't crying. No, he was mad. He stepped forward, and I could see his fists clenching. You don't get it, do you? He said, his voice low and almost threatening. We're not leaving until you agree to help us. At that point, I was done. I didn't care what they needed or why they were here. They were on my property, trying to intimidate me into giving them money. It wasn't just desperate, it was insane. Get off my porch, I said, my voice shaking a little, but I was trying to stay strong. You're not getting a penny from me. If you don't leave, I'm calling the cops. That seemed to get their attention. Lisa's eyes widened, and Brad took a step back, like he was actually considering what I'd said. But then Lisa started again, her voice rising in desperation. You wouldn't call the police on your own family. We're family. You can't do this. I'd heard enough. Without another word, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My heart was racing, and I could feel my hands shaking, but I wasn't going to back down. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. As I was on the phone with the dispatcher, I could still hear Lisa yelling outside, but I ignored it. The police showed up about 15 minutes later, and by then, Lisa and Brad were sitting on the steps of my porch like they were waiting for me to change my mind. When the officers arrived, I opened the door just enough to explain what was happening. They asked Lisa and Brad to leave, but Lisa tried to play the victim, saying how I was abandoning my family and refusing to help in a time of need. The officers weren't buying it. They told them both to leave, and finally, after what felt like hours, they did. But not before Lisa threw one last look over her shoulder, like she was still hoping I'd change my mind. Spoiler, I didn't. A couple days passed after Brad and Lisa showed up at my house, and I thought that was the end of it. I mean, I kicked them out, right? There's no way they'd come back after that. But I should have known better. They weren't the type to just give up. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was getting ready to head out when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it, but something told me to. I glanced down and saw it was a message from my dad. And this message, it was different. It wasn't like the others, where he was begging me to help or guilting me about family. This one was short, just 3 words. We need to talk. My gut reaction was to ignore it, but something about the way he phrased it, so blunt and to the point, made me uneasy. I decided to call him back just to see what he had to say. If it was more guilt trips, I'd hang up immediately. He picked up on the first ring. I'm glad you called, he said, his voice low, almost serious. I didn't like it. We've made a decision. That threw me off. What do you mean? Dad sighed, and there was this long pause before he spoke again. Lisa and Brad, they're out of options. They've lost everything. Julie and I can't help them anymore, and if you don't step in, they're going to have nothing. I was quiet, waiting for the catch, because there was always a catch. He continued, Julie and I have been talking, and we don't want to pressure you, but we need to know if you're going to help them or not. Because if you're not, we're going to have to cut ties with you. I blinked, not sure I heard him right. Wait, what? You heard me, he said. We can't keep this up anymore. If you're not going to help, then we have no choice but to stop talking to you. For a second, I just stood there, stunned. Was he seriously giving me an ultimatum? Help the people who betrayed me, or lose my family for good? It was insane. I couldn't believe it. You've got to be kidding, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You're seriously choosing them over me? Again? It's not like that, Dad tried to explain. It's just, they need help. And we can't keep watching them fall apart. We have to stand by them. And screw me, right? Just like before? I snapped. You expect me to bail them out after everything they've done? And now you're threatening to cut me off if I don't? There was another long pause, and for a moment I thought he might backtrack. But then he said quietly, I'm sorry, but yes. That was it. The final straw. I hung up without another word. I couldn't believe what had just happened, but one thing was clear. I wasn't backing down. They could cut me off if they saw Taika they wanted to, But I wasn't going to be blackmailed into helping the people who destroyed my life. And as far as I was concerned, I had just lost my family all over again. So, after that last phone call with my dad, I figured I'd hit rock bottom with this whole situation. I mean, how much worse could it get, right? My own father gave me an ultimatum: help my sister and Brad, or be cut off from the family for good. And honestly, I was pretty sure I'd made my peace with it. If that's how they wanted to play things, fine. I wasn't going to beg them to stay in my life. I had done that once, years ago, and I wasn't about to do it again. But of course, I should have known it wasn't over. A few days after that conversation, I was at home, trying to just focus on work, forget about the drama, and move on. It had been quiet for a little bit, which I thought was a good sign. No frantic texts, no surprise visits, just me, getting back to normal. But deep down, I knew something was coming. And sure enough, it did. It was around 7 p.m. on a Saturday when the doorbell rang. My heart sank immediately because, well, who else would it be? I wasn't expecting anyone, and nobody just shows up at my place unannounced, not unless they're looking for trouble. I walked to the door, already feeling that mix of dread and annoyance building up inside me. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. There they were. Dad, Julie, Lisa, and Brad. All four of them standing there like they were about to stage some kind of intervention. Lisa looked like she'd been crying. Her makeup was all smudged. Brad was doing his usual pacing thing, looking pissed off and stressed out. Dad and Julie stood a little back, like they were waiting for me to invite them in. I didn't. Instead, I just stood in the doorway, crossing my arms, trying to stay calm. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. "We need to talk," Dad said, his tone serious, almost like this was some official business meeting or something. I sighed. "We've already talked. You gave me your ultimatum. I'm not helping them, and I'm not changing my mind." Dad looked at Lisa, who stepped forward, her eyes red and puffy. "Please, just hear us out," she said, her voice cracking. "I know we messed up. I know we hurt you, but this is serious. We're about to lose everything." There it was again. The guilt, the pressure, the same crap they'd been throwing at me for weeks now. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. "And that's my problem." "How?" I asked, not moving an inch from the door. "You made your choices. You both did. Now you have to live with them." Lisa started crying again, but I wasn't feeling sorry for her. I couldn't. Not after everything. Brad finally stopped pacing long enough to jump in. "Look, I know you think we're just trying to use you," he said, his voice a little calmer now. "But this isn't about that. We're desperate. We don't have anyone else to turn to." "Yeah, and whose fault is that?" I shot back. "You burned every bridge you had." That seemed to hit a nerve because Brad's face twisted into this angry scowl. But before he could blow up, my dad stepped forward, holding up his hands like he was trying to calm everyone down. "Enough," Dad said, his voice firm. "Let's not get into another argument. We came here to make peace." I actually laughed at that. Make peace? Really? After they tried to blackmail me into giving them money? After they basically disowned me? "You want peace?" I said, shaking my head. "Then you should have thought about that before you all turned your backs on me." Julie, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. "We made a mistake," she said, her voice soft. "But this is family, and family helps each other when things go wrong." "No," I said, my voice cold now. "Family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't pick sides and leave one person behind just because it's convenient. You all chose Lisa and Brad. You made that decision years ago, and now you're dealing with the consequences. So don't come to me talking about family." There was a long pause. I could tell they weren't expecting me to stand my ground like this. I think they thought if they all showed up together, looking pitiful, I'd cave. But that wasn't going to happen. "I'm not giving you money," I said, my voice steady. "Not now, not ever." Dad's face tightened. "So that's it? You're really going to turn your back on us? Turn my back on you?" I couldn't believe he actually said that. "You turned your back on me, and now you want me to pretend like that never happened because you're in trouble? That's not how this works. I'm done. I've been done for years." Lisa stepped forward again, her voice desperate. "Please, I'm begging you. We're going to lose our house. We don't have anywhere else to go." I looked her dead in the eyes. "I don't care." And I didn't. I really didn't. That part of me, the part that used to care about what they thought, about making things right, was gone. It had died the night I saw Lisa and Brad together in that backyard. And nothing they said or did now was going to change that. Brad's anger finally boiled over. He stepped up, practically in my face. "You're really just going to stand there and let us lose everything? You think you're better than us because you have money now?" I didn't even flinch. "No," I said calmly. I think I'm smarter than you because I didn't throw my life away chasing something that was never mine to begin with. He looked like he was about to blow a gasket, but Dad stepped in between us, pushing him back. That's enough, Dad said, his voice low and threatening. We're leaving. Yeah, I said, holding the door open wider. You are. They all stared at me for a moment, like they were waiting for me to change my mind. Like maybe, at the last second, I'd say, okay, fine, I'll help. But I didn't. I stood my ground, and after what felt like an eternity, they turned and walked away. As they left, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, like a weight had finally been lifted off my chest. For the first time in years, I felt free. They could cut me off if they wanted to. They could play the victim and act like I was the bad guy, but I didn't care anymore. I had my life, and they had theirs, and that was all that mattered. When I closed the door behind me, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't looking back. My daughter left, claiming her stepdad is the real man she deserves, as her father. Man, where do I even start with this? I guess I should go back to when things really fell apart. So, last year, Maria, my ex-wife, and I finalized our divorce. We had been together for, 16 years? Yeah, 16. Anyway, things hadn't been great for a while, but I always thought we could work through it. I mean, every couple has their problems, right? Turns out I was wrong. Real wrong. Maria was having what she called an emotional affair with this guy from work, Brian. And honestly, I'm not even sure what the hell that means. Like, it wasn't physical, at first anyway. But she was out there telling this dude things she should have been talking to me about. You know, all the intimate stuff. Her feelings, frustrations, hopes, whatever. It's like she built a relationship with him while we were still married. I can't say I was shocked when she finally came clean about it, but it felt like I had been punched in the gut when she told me she wanted to be with him now. Anyway, we ended up splitting up, and the divorce went through pretty fast. I just wanted it to be over with. The only thing that kept me going was my daughter, Lily. She's 14 now, but back then I still felt like we had a bond, you know? We were always close, or at least I thought we were. She was my little girl, my buddy. But after the divorce, everything between us changed. At first, I tried to keep things normal between us. I didn't say a bad word about her mom. I didn't want to be that guy. I figured Lily didn't need to hear about all the drama and pain Maria had caused me. So I tried to be the good dad, kept giving her gifts, took her out to do fun stuff, and didn't make her choose sides. But nothing I did seemed to matter. Lily was cold toward me, real cold. It was like she wasn't even my kid anymore. Every time I saw her, it felt like she had built this wall between us. And let me tell you, there's nothing worse than realizing your own child doesn't want to be around you. I kept brushing it off at first, told myself, hey, she's just a teenager. She's going through her own stuff. Give her some time. But the more time passed, the worse it got. I remember one time I got her this necklace for her birthday, something she'd been wanting for a while. She took it, barely said thanks, and that was it. No smile, no excitement, just nothing. That hurt, but I kept telling myself she'd come around eventually. Then one day, it happened. The day that still messes with my head. We were sitting in the car. I think I had just picked her up from her mom's house. We weren't talking much, like usual, and out of nowhere, she says, you know, Brian's the dad I deserve, not you. I didn't even know how to react. I was stunned. Like, what the hell do you even say to that? I remember my throat tightening up, like I couldn't breathe for a second. I just kind of stared at her, waiting for her to say she was kidding or something, but she didn't. She just sat there looking out the window like it was no big deal, like she hadn't just shattered my entire world in one sentence. I pulled the car over to the side of the road because I didn't trust myself to keep driving after hearing that. I couldn't process it. My own daughter, telling me that this guy, this Brian dude, who had been in her life for, a few months, was a better father to her than me, the guy who raised her for 14 years. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. I just sat there in silence, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. And the worst part? She didn't even seem to care. She just sat there scrolling on her phone like it was nothing, like I didn't matter anymore. I dropped her off at her mom's place without another word. I didn't even get out of the car. I just waited for her to leave, watched her walk away, and then I lost it. I got home that night, and it all hit me at once. Everything. The divorce, the betrayal, my daughter siding with this new guy over me. It was like the whole world was collapsing around me, and I had no way to stop it. I didn't go to work the next day. I couldn't. I just needed time to be alone and think. Well, more like not think, because every time I tried to figure out how it had come to this, I couldn't make sense of it. Lily's words kept playing in my head over and over. Brian's the dad I deserve. It was like someone had taken a knife and twisted it in my chest. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong. Where did I mess up? How could the daughter I loved so much think so little of me? After a couple of days, I realized I had to make a choice for my own sanity. I couldn't keep going like this, trying to force a relationship with someone who didn't want it. As much as it hurt, I decided I needed to pull back. Emotionally, financially, all of it. I wasn't going to keep bending over backward for someone who clearly didn't care about me. That night, I sat down with all my financial documents and made the first big decision. I removed Lily as the primary beneficiary from all my accounts. That meant my life insurance, my 401k, everything. I know it sounds harsh, but at that moment, I realized I had to protect myself. If she didn't want me in her life, I wasn't going to keep putting her first. Instead, I made my sister Rebecca the beneficiary. Rebecca was the only one who really understood what I was going through. She'd been there for me through the divorce, listened to all my rants about Maria and Brian, and never judged me for any of it. She had been through her own tough breakup a few years back, so she got it. Once I made that change, I felt a little better, like I was finally taking control of my life again. I didn't owe Lily anything beyond what I was legally required to give her, and that's how I was going to handle things from now on. Just do the bare minimum until she turned 18 and then, well, I don't know what happens after that, but at least I'd be free from all this pain. After that conversation with Lily, things in my life started to change real fast. It wasn't like I wanted them to, but I knew that if I kept holding on, I'd lose myself. I mean, when your own kid basically says, I don't need you anymore, what are you supposed to do? I wasn't going to beg her to let me be her dad. I tried that for months, and it got me nowhere. So I made the decision to pull back, emotionally and financially. It was time to stop pretending everything would magically go back to how it was. I guess the first person I told about all this was my sister Rebecca. She's my rock, man. She's been through her own crap, so she always knows what to say. I remember going over to her place one afternoon and just laying it all out for her. I told her about what Lily said, how she's been cold ever since the divorce, and how I'd had enough of it. Rebecca wasn't surprised. She had warned me months ago that Lily was getting too close to Brian and Maria. She'd seen it happen before, kids picking sides when their parents split, even when it didn't make sense. But hearing her say, I told you so, didn't make me feel any better. In fact, it kind of made me feel worse, like I should have seen it coming and done something different. Look, Rebecca said, you've done everything you could. You've been a great dad, but if she doesn't want to see that, that's on her. You can't keep chasing her around trying to fix it. You got to take care of yourself now. And that's when it really clicked for me. I realized I couldn't keep pouring myself into a relationship that wasn't there anymore. So I went home that night and started making some big changes. It wasn't easy, though. The first thing I did was sit down and go through my financials. I took Lily off as the beneficiary for everything: life insurance, savings, even the small emergency fund I had tucked away. I wasn't going to just hand over my hard-earned money to someone who saw me as replaceable. Instead, I added Rebecca as my primary beneficiary. She was the only one who had been there for me through everything, so it just made sense. I also started pulling money out of the college fund I had saved for Lily. This one was tough. I'd been saving for her education since she was born. Every paycheck I'd set a little aside, thinking one day it'd help her get into whatever college she wanted. But now I couldn't see a future where she even cared about going to school, let alone having me pay for it. So, yeah, I pulled the money out. Not all of it at once, but enough to take a couple of trips and do something for myself for a change. It wasn't all selfish, though. I used some of the money on Rebecca, too. She deserves it. We went on a 2-week trip to Europe, just me and her. We saw Paris, Rome, and Barcelona. It was exactly what I needed to clear my head. I know it probably sounds harsh, spending the money I had saved for Lily, but honestly it felt like I was reclaiming something that had been taken from me. When I got back from that trip, I felt different. Not exactly healed or anything, but more at peace with my decision. I wasn't sitting around waiting for Lily to change her mind about me. I was moving on. And to be honest, part of me thought maybe this distance would make her realize how much she was hurting me. Maybe, just maybe, she'd come around and apologize, or at least try to understand where I was coming from. But that never happened. Instead, I started hearing things from other people. My neighbor, for example, mentioned seeing Lily with Brian at some school event. He said she looked happier than he'd ever seen her. That stung a bit, but I wasn't surprised. Brian was doing all the things I couldn't, I guess. He was stepping into the dad role, whether I liked it or not. And it wasn't just at school. I started hearing about Brian taking her shopping, taking her to sports games, doing all the things I used to do with her. The more I heard, the more it confirmed that I'd made the right choice to step back. But even though I was moving on, I wasn't about to cut Lily off completely. I mean, I'm not heartless. I still paid child support, did all the legal stuff, and made sure she had what she needed. But the extra stuff, the emotional support, the gifts, the surprises, nah, I was done with all that. I was done bending over backward to make her happy when she clearly didn't care about me. The strangest part was, Lily didn't even ask about the changes at first. I thought she'd notice right away that I wasn't sending her gifts anymore, or that I wasn't texting her to check in as much. But weeks went by and I didn't hear a word. I guess she was too busy with Brian and her mom to notice or care. It was like I had become a ghost in her life, and she didn't even realize it. But then, everything blew up. It was a Saturday evening when it happened. I was just sitting at home, catching up on some work when my phone buzzed. It was Lily. She wanted to come over and talk. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, so I figured maybe this was it. Maybe she was ready to have a real conversation. Maybe things could get better. But when she walked through the door, I could tell right away something was wrong. She had this look on her face, like she was angry but trying to hold it in. I didn't even get a chance to ask her what was going on before she dropped a bomb on me. "I know what you did," she said, her voice shaking with anger. I was confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I know you took me off your accounts," she spat out. "And I know you've been spending the college fund. How could you do that to me? That money was for my future." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't expected her to find out like this, especially not so soon. But there she was, standing in front of me, hurt and angry, demanding answers. I could have lied, made up some excuse, but what would that have accomplished? She deserved the truth, even if it hurt. "Yeah, I made some changes," I admitted. "But you need to understand, Lily. You told me Brian was the father you deserved. You made it clear you didn't want me in your life anymore." Her face turned red with frustration. "I never said I didn't want you. I was angry, but you're still my dad." I shook my head. "You didn't act like it, Lily. You pushed me away and I had to protect myself. I'm still here doing what I'm supposed to do, but I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not." She didn't like that answer. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her, and just like that, any hope I had of fixing things seemed to vanish. I sat there in the silence, wondering if I had made the right decision, but knowing deep down that I didn't really have a choice. Update 1. So after that last argument with Lily, things were pretty tense. I didn't hear from her for a while, and I wasn't exactly rushing to reach out either. Honestly, I was tired. Tired of the back and forth, tired of trying to fix things that just couldn't be fixed. But that didn't mean I was prepared for what happened next. A few months went by, and I'm thinking, maybe this distance is what we both need. Maybe some time apart will help us figure things out. I'm focusing on work, seeing my sister Rebecca more, trying to get my life back together. I wasn't expecting to hear anything from Lily. Then one evening, out of nowhere, she shows up at my door. I should have known something was up just from the way she was standing there, arms crossed, with that look on her face like she was ready for a fight. I barely got the door open before she was already inside, pacing back and forth in my living room like she owned the place. "All right, what's going on?" I asked, shutting the door behind her. She spun around and glared at me. "You know exactly what's going on. Why did you do it?" Now I'm still trying to figure out what she's talking about, but it didn't take long for her to spill it. "You took me off everything," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "The accounts, the college fund, everything." "What the hell, Dad?" I won't lie, that stung. Even though I knew she had distanced herself from me, hearing her call me Dad in that moment hit different. Like, after all this time of pushing me away, now she wants to pull the dad card? But I kept my cool. I knew this conversation was coming eventually. "Yeah, I made some changes," I said calmly. "You said Brian was the dad you deserved. You made it clear you didn't need me in your life anymore." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop. I was mad. I didn't mean that. But this is a whole other level. You're taking away my future." That's when it clicked. It wasn't about the relationship between us. It wasn't about her missing me or feeling like I wasn't there for her. No, this was about the money. The college fund, the accounts, everything I had been saving for her future. She was pissed because she found out that I'd been using it for myself and for Rebecca. "Lily, I didn't just wake up one day and decide to cut you off," I told her. "You made your choice. You chose your mom. You chose Brian. I had to protect myself." "You're supposed to be my dad," she shouted, her voice cracking a little. "You're supposed to take care of me no matter what." That's when I lost it a bit. I didn't yell, but I definitely wasn't as calm as before. "Take care of you?" "I tried, Lily. I tried for months after the divorce to keep us close. I never badmouthed your mom. I never said a single bad thing about Brian, even though he was the reason your mom and I split up. I was there, trying to be the dad you say I'm supposed to be, and what did I get for it? Nothing. You pushed me away at every turn. You acted like I didn't exist. So yeah, I made changes. I had to look out for myself because no one else was. She looked shocked, like she wasn't expecting me to push back. I guess she thought I'd just roll over and apologize, but that wasn't happening this time. I was done with that. I didn't push you away, she yelled back, but there was less fire in her voice now. I was I was just trying to figure things out. Figure things out? I shook my head. You didn't even give me a chance, Lily. You chose Brian the second you found out about him. You didn't just side with your mom. You erased me from your life. We both stood there, the silence filling the room. I could tell she was trying to process what I was saying, but I wasn't sure if she was really getting it. I mean, how do you explain to your own kid that they hurt you so much that you had to cut them off just to keep your sanity? Eventually, she sat down on the couch, looking more defeated than angry now. So that's it? You're just done with me? I sighed and sat down across from her. I'm not done with you, Lily. You're my daughter, and I'll always love you. But I can't keep putting myself in a position where I'm constantly being hurt. I'm still here, doing what I have to do, but I'm not going to pretend like everything's fine when it's not. She stared at the floor, not saying anything for a while. Then she finally looked up at me. What if I want things to go back to the way they were? That question hit hard. I wanted to say yes, that I'd do anything to fix things. But the truth is, too much had changed. There was no going back to how things were before the divorce, before Brian, before all of this. Lily, I said carefully, we can work on rebuilding things, but it's going to take time, and it's going to take effort from both of us. I'm not just going to jump back in and pretend like none of this happened. She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't really satisfied with that answer. I don't think either of us was, but it was the best I could offer. I couldn't go back to being the dad who just gave and gave without getting anything in return. After a few minutes, she stood up to leave. I need to think about all this, she said quietly, not making eye contact. Take all the time you need, I replied, trying to stay calm, even though part of me was screaming inside. She walked to the door, paused for a second like she was going to say something else, but then just left without another word. And that was it. Another confrontation, another unresolved conversation. But this time, it felt different. There was no door slam, no angry outburst. Just silence. I sat there for a long time after she left, thinking about everything. I wanted to believe that maybe this was the start of something better between us, but honestly, I didn't know. I'd been let down so many times that it was hard to have hope anymore. All I knew was that I had to stick to my decision. I couldn't go back to how things were before. If she wanted a relationship, she'd have to meet me halfway. And if not, well, I'd done all I could do. The rest was up to her. Update 2. So, after Lily left my house that night, I thought maybe things were finally starting to calm down. We had the confrontation, said what we needed to say, and I figured she'd take her time to think things through. I didn't expect some miracle where she'd call me the next day, but I thought the worst was behind us. But of course, I was wrong. Because a few days later, I got a call from someone I really wasn't looking forward to hearing from, Maria. Now, to be fair, we've kept things pretty civil since the divorce. Mostly because we had to for Lily's sake. We weren't friends or anything, but we weren't screaming at each other either. But this call? Yeah, this one wasn't civil at all. It was a Thursday night, and I had just finished cleaning up the kitchen when my phone started ringing. I saw her name on the screen and immediately had that sinking feeling in my gut. Like, why would Maria be calling me now? She never calls unless it's about something serious, and I was not in the mood for more drama. But I picked up, and right away, she starts in with the attitude. Why are you doing this to our daughter? That's how she opened the conversation. No hello, no how are you, just straight into accusations. I sighed and leaned against the counter. What are you talking about, Maria? She huffed like I was supposed to know exactly what she meant. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Lily came home upset because you took her off your accounts. She's been crying for days, saying you don't care about her anymore. Now, at this point, I'm already annoyed. Not because Lily's upset. I mean, I get why she's hurt, but because Maria's acting like I'm some kind of villain here. Like I just woke up one day and decided to hurt my daughter for fun. Maria, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, I made those changes because Lily made it clear she didn't want me in her life. She's been pushing me away for months. What was I supposed to do? Just keep pretending like everything's fine? She cut me off before I could even finish. You're supposed to be her father. You don't just get to cut her off like that. She's your child. And there it was. The guilt trip. I knew it was coming, but it still hit hard. Because yeah, Lily is my child, and yeah, I still love her. But that doesn't change the fact that she's been treating me like garbage for the better part of a year. I am her father, I replied, trying not to raise my voice. But being her father doesn't mean I have to keep giving and giving while she treats me like I don't exist. I've done my part, Maria. I've tried to keep a relationship with her, and she shut me out. This isn't about the money. This is about me protecting myself. There was a long pause on her end. I could hear her breathing, probably trying to figure out what to say next. But instead of calming down, she came back even angrier. Protect yourself? She snapped. What are you talking about? She's 14, for God's sake. She's confused, and you're punishing her for it. You're supposed to be the adult here, not the one making her feel worse. Now, I don't know what it is about people saying, you're supposed to be the adult, but it always sets me off. It's like they're saying I'm not allowed to have feelings because I'm the dad. Like I'm just supposed to take whatever crap gets thrown at me because that's what adults do. I have been the adult, Maria, I shot back. I've been trying to be there for Lily since the divorce, and what has she done? She told me Brian was the dad she deserved. She told me she didn't need me anymore. How am I supposed to keep pretending that doesn't hurt? She didn't answer that. Instead, she went for a different angle. This is all because of Brian, isn't it? You're jealous that she's close to him, and now you're punishing her for it. That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Of course, she thought this was about Brian. In her mind, everything had to come back to him. I was just the bitter ex-husband, jealous that the guy she cheated on me with was now playing dad to my daughter. This has nothing to do with Brian, I said firmly. This is about me and Lily. It's about how she's treated me ever since you brought him into her life. I'm not punishing her. I'm doing what I need to do for my own sanity. She sighed, and I could tell she was getting frustrated. Lily's hurting right now. She's a kid, and she doesn't know how to handle all of this. And you're just making things worse. She thinks you don't love her anymore. That one stung. Not because I thought it was true, but because it showed how much damage had been done. I do love Lily. I always have. But how do you show love to someone who doesn't want it? How do you keep reaching out when every time you try, they slap your hand away? That's not true, I said quietly. I've never stopped loving her, but I can't keep letting her hurt me either. I have to draw a line somewhere. Maria was silent for a minute, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand. But then she said the thing I was dreading. If you don't fix this, you're going to lose her forever. I could feel my chest tighten. Because that was my biggest fear, even if I didn't want to admit it, losing Lily for good. But I also knew that I couldn't just roll over and do whatever it took to make her happy. That's not how relationships work. I don't want to lose her, I said, my voice low, but she has to meet me halfway. I can't be the only one trying here. Maria sighed again, but this time it sounded less angry and more tired. I just don't want to see her hurt anymore. She's been through enough. And there it was. The part of me that understood. I didn't want to see Lily hurt either. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore how much she had hurt me. It wasn't fair for Maria to act like Lily was the only one struggling here. I get it, I said. But you've got to understand my side of this too. I'm doing what I think is best for both of us. I'm still here for her, but I can't keep pretending like nothing's wrong. There was a long pause before Maria finally spoke again. All right, I'll talk to her. But you need to be ready to fix this when she's ready to talk. I wasn't sure what fixing this would even look like, but I agreed. I'm ready, whenever she is. And with that, the call ended. I stood there for a while, just staring at my phone, wondering if I had made the right choice. I didn't know if things would ever be fixed between Lily and me, but at least now, there was a glimmer of hope that maybe we could start over, someday. Update 3. After that call with Maria, I thought maybe things would start shifting. Like there'd be some kind of progress or something, even if it was small. I had told her everything, my side of things, why I did what I did, why I needed to protect myself, and while she wasn't thrilled, at least she said she'd talk to Lily. So, I waited, and waited, but nothing happened. Days went by, and I heard nothing from either of them. It was frustrating. On the one hand, I knew I had made my choice. I had set boundaries, and those boundaries were important to me. But on the other hand, there was still this huge part of me that was hoping Lily would come around. Maybe she'd show up one day and say she understood, or at least that she wanted to talk. But that day never came. Instead, I got another surprise. One afternoon, I got home from work, and there was an envelope on my doorstep. No note, no return address, just an envelope with my name on it. I brought it inside, figuring it was some kind of official paperwork or bill, but when I opened it, my heart sank. Inside was a letter from Lily. I don't know why, but my hands were shaking when I opened it. I guess part of me was scared of what she might say. Maybe it was going to be a hate-filled letter about how I'd ruined her life. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Either way, I wasn't prepared for what I read. The letter wasn't long. In fact, it was pretty short and to the point, but it was enough to stop me in my tracks. Dad, it started. I've thought a lot about what you said. I don't agree with everything, but I get that you're hurt. I'm hurt too. I don't know how we got here, but I don't think we can fix it. I've decided to move in with Brian and Mom full time. I won't need you anymore, and I'm changing my last name to Brian's. This is what's best for me. That was it. The letter ended just like that. Simple, cold, and straight to the point. She didn't want me anymore. She didn't need me anymore, and she was making it official by taking Brian's last name. I sat there at the kitchen table for what felt like forever, just staring at the letter. My mind was racing, but my body felt like it was frozen. She was gone. Just like that. I mean, I knew things were bad between us, but I didn't think it would come to this. I didn't think she'd actually go as far as to take his name, to literally erase me from her life. The worst part? I didn't know how to respond. I'd spent so long fighting for her, trying to keep her in my life. But now she was making it clear she didn't want that. She had made her choice. Brian was the dad she deserved, not me. I didn't call her. I didn't call Maria. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, staring at the letter, feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. What do you even do when your own kid tells you they are done with you? For the next few days, I felt like I was in a fog. I went to work, did what I had to do, but it felt like I was on autopilot. Every time I thought about the letter, I got this tight feeling in my chest. I couldn't shake the idea that I had somehow failed. Maybe if I had done things differently, if I had fought harder for our relationship, if I had given more, maybe things wouldn't have ended up like this. But then, Rebecca came over one evening. She noticed something was off right away, and of course, I ended up telling her everything. I showed her the letter, expecting her to say something like, "It's going to be okay," or "You'll work things out eventually." But she didn't. Instead, she just looked at me and said something I wasn't expecting. "You didn't fail, you know." I looked at her confused. "What are you talking about? Of course I failed. My own daughter doesn't want me in her life anymore." Rebecca shook her head. "No, you didn't fail. You did everything you could. You gave her space, you set boundaries, and you tried to have a relationship with her. But at the end of the day, she made her own choice. This isn't all on you." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But it's hard to shake the feeling that you've somehow screwed up when your kid chooses someone else over you. Still, what Rebecca said made sense. I had done what I could, and Lily had made her decision. It wasn't my job to fix everything, especially when she wasn't willing to meet me halfway. Over the next few weeks, I started to accept that this was the reality now. Lily was gone, and I had to move forward. I wasn't going to chase her down or beg her to come back. I'd already done that, and it didn't work. She had made her choice, and I had to live with it, no matter how much it hurt. But then, just when I thought things had finally settled down, I got another call. This time, it wasn't Maria. It was Lily. And this time, it wasn't a confrontation or a fight. It was worse. "Dad," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months. I need help." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. After everything, after the letter, after the decision to take Brian's name, after all of it, she was calling me, asking for help. I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me wanted to shut her out, just like she had done to me. Part of me wanted to tell her she had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. But the other part of me, the part that's still her dad, no matter what, knew I couldn't do that. "What's going on, Lily?" I asked, my voice a little shaky. There was a long pause before she finally spoke. "It's Brian. He's not who I thought he was. I don't know what to do." And just like that, everything changed again. The guy she had chosen over me, the guy who was supposed to be the father she deserved, suddenly, he wasn't the hero anymore. Suddenly, she needed me again. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were. But for the first time in months, I felt like there was a tiny sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Maybe we could finally start to fix things. But this time, I wasn't going to be the one doing all the fixing. If Lily wanted me back in her life, she was going to have to put in the effort too. So, after that call from Lily, My head was all over the place. I mean, it was the first time in what felt like forever that she actually reached out to me, needed me. But it wasn't exactly what I expected. She wasn't calling to fix things between us. She was calling because she needed help with Brian. And honestly, I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Part of me was relieved she reached out at all, but another part of me was still hurt. Was she only coming to me because things had gone wrong with Brian? I didn't get much detail from her on the phone. She just said Brian wasn't who she thought he was. I didn't push for answers right then. Instead, I told her we could talk in person. She agreed to come over the next day, and that gave me a night to sit and stew over what this was really about. The next morning, I was pacing around my house like a crazy person, waiting for her to show up. My mind kept going in circles, thinking about everything that had happened between us. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of us fixing things or just another mess I'd have to deal with. Either way, I knew I had to be ready for whatever she was about to drop on me. When she finally got to the house, I could tell something was off right away. She looked different. Not just sad or upset, but kind of shaken. She wasn't her usual guarded, angry self. She sat down on the couch without saying much, and I sat across from her, waiting for her to start. She didn't look at me at first. Instead, she stared at her hands like she was trying to figure out how to say whatever was on her mind. Finally, she spoke, and when she did, her voice was quiet. Brian's not who I thought he was. He's been lying to all of us. I tried to stay calm. What do you mean? What's going on? She took a deep breath, still not looking at me. He's been hiding things from my mom and me. Money stuff, job stuff, just everything. I don't even know who he really is anymore. I didn't say anything right away. I just let her keep talking because honestly, I didn't want to make this about me. As much as I had been hurt by her choosing Brian over me, this wasn't the time to rub it in her face. She needed me to listen. Lily kept going, telling me how Brian had been lying about his finances for months, pretending like everything was fine when, really, he was in a lot of debt. Apparently, he had been using money that wasn't his and keeping it a secret from both her and Maria. Now everything was starting to fall apart, and they didn't know what to do. I trusted him, she said, finally looking up at me with tears in her eyes. I thought he was better than you, and now everything's just falling apart. That hit me hard. Not because of the comparison, but because this was the first time she had admitted to being wrong. And while part of me wanted to feel vindicated, I didn't. I just felt sad for her. Because as much as I wanted to say I told you so, I knew that wasn't going to help. She was already dealing with enough. Lily, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could, I'm really sorry you're going through this, but you need to know that no matter what, I'm still here for you. I always have been. She didn't say anything for a minute, but then she nodded, wiping away her tears. It wasn't the dramatic reunion I had imagined, but it was a start. Maybe this was the moment we'd finally begin to heal things between us. Maybe now, with Brian out of the picture, we could actually rebuild our relationship. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was a small chance we could move forward. Together. Ex-wife tried to take my luxury apartment in the divorce, but she was shocked when I revealed it's just a rental. The gold digger got what she deserved. Back in 2008, I was just starting out at university, trying to get a hang of the whole being an adult thing. Like most people my age, I didn't have much money, but somehow I got lucky. Me and my then girlfriend at the time, let's call her Kate, and our buddy Rob were all on the lookout for a place to live. We were searching for something that wouldn't completely drain our wallets, and after weeks of scrolling through ads, something pretty cool came up. This place was a 2-bedroom apartment, right in the middle of the city. Like, the location couldn't get better. Shops, restaurants, campus, everything was right there. The rent? Way below what you'd expect for that area. It almost felt like we'd hit the jackpot, and honestly, we kinda had. The owner of the place had some tough times because of everything happening back then. Economy wasn't great, people losing jobs, that kind of stuff. She lost her job and decided to move abroad, try her luck somewhere else. Since she didn't want to deal with managing the apartment from another country, she made a pretty sweet deal with us. We could live there as long as we took care of the bills and maintenance. It was almost like we owned the place, but we didn't. We were renters, just with a bit more control over things. It wasn't some big fancy arrangement. She trusted us enough to handle everything, and we didn't have to bug her about stuff. In return, we got to live in this awesome spot for a fraction of what most people were paying in that area. So it was me, Kate, Rob, and Rob's girlfriend at the time, all packed into this little 2-bedroom apartment. It was tight, yeah, but we made it work. Rob and his girlfriend took one room, and Kate and I had the other. We were all just starting out, so it wasn't like we were picky. We were more excited about having a roof over our heads and a place to crash after late nights of studying or hanging out with friends. I know it sounds crazy, but it really did feel like our own place. Even though we were renting, I was the one handling everything: bills, maintenance, rent. It was all in my name, and I guess over time I started thinking of it like my apartment. I didn't even consider it weird that I wasn't the actual owner, just the renter. It was all so normal to me. Fast forward a couple years, and things changed. As they do, right? Kate and I broke up. No big drama, we just drifted apart. Happens. Rob and his girlfriend? They decided to move out and get their own place, which left me with the entire apartment to myself. It was a weird shift, going from a full apartment to just me. I mean, I'd gone from sharing a place with 3 other people to being completely alone in the middle of the city. It was quiet, but honestly, I kind of liked it. The rent stayed the same, super cheap for what it was, so I figured why not just stay? I could afford it on my own now that I had a full-time job. Sure, it was a 2 bedroom apartment, but I didn't need to move out just because I was the only one living there. I mean, what are the odds I'd find another place that good for that price? Living alone wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be. I had friends over all the time, and the second bedroom became sort of a free Airbnb for people who wanted to crash after a night out or didn't feel like trekking back to wherever they lived outside the city. It wasn't like I was charging anyone or anything. It was just a place for my friends to hang out or spend the night when they needed to. I liked the company, too. Kept things lively. And because I was handling everything like bills, rent, repairs, whatever, it really did start to feel like my own place. It's funny, but I never really thought much about the fact that it was still technically a rental. I'd been there so long, dealing with the landlord directly had become second nature. She trusted me, and I took care of the place like it was my own. At this point, I was basically running the whole show, and I guess that's when I stopped thinking about it as just a rental. The landlord even told me she didn't want to deal with all the paperwork every month, so we made this deal where I'd just handle everything and she'd let me stay. It was all under the table, super low-key, and worked out great for both of us. I paid rent straight to her, and she didn't have to worry about anything else. As long as the money came through and I kept the place in good shape, she was happy. I mean, I wasn't about to complain. It was way cheaper than what anyone else was paying in that part of the city, so why would I rock the boat? So yeah, there I was, early 30s, living solo in this sweet 2 bedroom apartment in the city. To everyone else, it probably looked like I had my life all figured out. Great location, nice apartment, steady job. Honestly, I felt pretty content with how things were going. Sure, I didn't own the place, but it was mine in every way that mattered, at least in my head. And that's pretty much how things went for a long time. The apartment became part of my identity, if that makes sense. People would ask me where I lived, and I'd just say, my place in the city. I didn't think much about it. I guess in my mind it was mine, even though legally it wasn't. It's not like I was out here pretending I was some big shot homeowner. I didn't even really think about it like that. I was just a guy living in an apartment he'd been in for years, paying rent and keeping things running smoothly. It was my home, plain and simple. Looking back, I can see how it might seem odd that I never really mentioned the rental thing to anyone, but I swear, it wasn't intentional. It just didn't come up. I wasn't hiding anything, and I wasn't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. It just became part of my routine, my life. Rent paid, bills sorted, friends crashing in the spare room. It all felt pretty normal, but I guess that's where things start getting a bit more complicated. So, fast forward to 2020, life was going pretty well, all things considered. I was still living in the same apartment, still loving the central location, and things were smooth. My job was steady, and I'd gotten pretty used to living solo. But sometimes life just throws people at you when you least expect it. That's when I met Melissa. It wasn't anything super dramatic or love at first sight stuff. We met through some mutual friends at a party. She was cool, smart, and we hit it off pretty quickly. We got into a conversation that just flowed. You know? We were talking about random stuff, travel, work, life, and it felt like we were just on the same page about a lot of things. I could tell she was one of those people who had her life planned out. She had goals, a timeline for everything, which was refreshing at the time. Now, I'll admit, things moved faster than I was expecting. Melissa wasn't shy about wanting to settle down. She made it clear early on that she was looking for something serious. And me being me, I thought, why not? I wasn't getting any younger, and she seemed like she had her life together. Plus, I was kind of swept up in that whole new relationship excitement, where everything feels great, and you don't really stop to think about the small stuff. We started dating pretty seriously, and within a few months, things got even more intense. Melissa started dropping hints about wanting to move in together. I wasn't against the idea. I mean, we were getting along really well, and it felt like the logical next step. The apartment was more than big enough for both of us, and honestly, I thought it'd be nice to have someone around more often. When we talked about moving in, it never really crossed my mind to sit her down and explain every little detail about the apartment. Like, sure, it was technically a rental, but it had been my home for so long that I didn't think it mattered. I was the one handling everything, paying rent, taking care of the bills, all that. In my head, it wasn't a big deal. To me, it felt like my place, and that's what I called it. I never even thought to clarify that I didn't own it. It just didn't seem relevant. So, yeah, Melissa moved in pretty quickly after that. We were officially living together, and for a while, everything was going great. I mean, we had our little routines, cooking together, watching Netflix, the usual couple stuff. She started making small changes around the apartment, adding her own touch to the decor and rearranging furniture. I didn't mind. In fact, I kind of liked that she was making the place feel more like ours, instead of just mine. Now, here's where things started to get a bit tricky. Melissa wasn't just thinking about moving in. She had the whole future mapped out. She was talking about marriage within the first 6 months of dating, and I was like, whoa, okay, this is moving fast. But like I said before, she had a plan, and I was in that phase of just going along with it because, honestly, it didn't seem like a bad idea at the time. By early 2021, we were engaged. Yep, I put a ring on it. Again, it all happened so fast that I didn't really have time to process everything. But I was in love, or at least I thought I was at the time, and marriage seemed like the natural next step. Plus, Melissa was already in full wedding planning mode, and I was just kind of rolling with it. She was excited, and I didn't want to rain on her parade by asking too many questions or slowing things down. Looking back, though, there were definitely moments where I should have pumped the brakes a bit. Like Melissa was always talking about our future and making plans that sometimes didn't even feel like they involved me. She'd talk about buying a house, starting a family, and all this stuff that honestly felt a bit overwhelming. But I was in too deep at that point to really stop and think about whether I was actually ready for all of that. It felt like I was just being swept along in the current. The apartment, meanwhile, became more and more ours in Melissa's eyes. She'd bring up ideas about renovations, maybe knocking down a wall to open up the kitchen or turning the second bedroom into a nursery. I'd just nod along, thinking, well, that's not going to happen. It's not like I could make major changes to a rental apartment, but again, I didn't see the need to explain that. I didn't think it was important. After all, we were happy, right? We got married in mid-2021, and for a while, things were still good. Married life didn't feel that different from living together before. We had the same routines, the same little habits, but there was this slow shift. I don't know exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way, we started growing apart. It was subtle at first, little disagreements over trivial stuff like what to watch on TV or where to go for dinner. But those small things started adding up. Melissa, who had once been so focused on our future, started spending more time with her friends or going out by herself. Meanwhile, I was still doing the same old thing, working, hanging out at home, keeping things running like I always had. It was like we were living two different lives under the same roof, and neither of us really knew how to bridge that gap. By the time 2022 rolled around, it was becoming pretty clear that we weren't on the same page anymore. We'd have these awkward silences where we'd both be sitting in the same room, but it felt like we were miles apart. The conversations that used to come so easily were now strained, and we were both tiptoeing around the fact that something was off. We tried to fix it, of course. We had those heart-to-heart talks where we promised to work on things, to communicate better, to make more time for each other. But the truth was, we were just too different. Melissa still had her big plans, and I was starting to realize that I didn't really fit into them. I wasn't sure if I ever had. And that's when the talk of divorce came up. Neither of us was happy, and after one particularly rough conversation, we both admitted that maybe this wasn't working out the way we'd hoped. It wasn't anyone's fault, really. We just weren't right for each other. So after just over a year of marriage, we agreed to part ways. We were surprisingly calm about the whole thing. No big fights, no slamming doors. We just sat down like adults and decided to call it quits. We'd tried, but it was time to move on. Melissa made plans to move out, and I figured I'd just go back to living alone in the apartment, just like I had before. But of course, things didn't end there. Not by a long shot. So, after Melissa and I decided to get divorced, things were surprisingly chill for a while. We both kind of just did our own thing, living in the apartment while she made plans to move out. I figured, okay, this is going smoother than I expected. No big fights, no screaming matches, just two people realizing they weren't meant for each other. We were both handling it like adults. At least, I thought we were. I was at work one day, going about my usual stuff, when I got this email from Melissa. I figured it was something about moving or the divorce paperwork, but nope, it was something else entirely. The subject line didn't give much away, just said something like, apartment info. I clicked on it, and there it was, a full-blown real estate valuation report attached to the email. I remember sitting there, staring at my screen for a solid minute, trying to process what I was looking at. Melissa had gone behind my back and hired someone to evaluate the apartment's worth. Like, she actually paid someone to come in, check out the place, and tell her how much it was worth on the market. She didn't mention this to me beforehand, didn't ask if I wanted to be involved, nothing. And then, in the body of the email, she casually dropped the bomb that she expected me to pay her half of the apartment's value once she moved out. I couldn't believe it. I was dumbfounded. Half of the apartment's value? What value? This place is a rental. I'm sitting there thinking, has she completely lost her mind? I thought maybe she was joking, or maybe she misunderstood something. So I took a deep breath and typed out a response, trying not to lose it. I wrote back something like, hey, did I never tell you this place is a rental? I explained that I've been renting this apartment for years and paying everything directly to the owner, and that I don't own anything here. I couldn't just give her half of the value because there wasn't any value to split. It's not mine to sell. I made it clear that I didn't ask her to get a real estate appraisal, and honestly, I couldn't figure out why she thought I could afford to buy out half of a place in the city center. She knows where I work and how much I make. It's not like I'm rolling in cash here. Her response? She didn't take it well, to put it mildly. About 10 minutes after I sent that email, my phone started buzzing like crazy. It was Melissa, and the second I picked up, she started yelling. She was going off about how I had lied to her for years, how I had hidden the fact that we were living in a rental, and how she thought this was our property the whole time. I tried to get a word in, but she was so angry, I couldn't even think straight. She kept accusing me of deceiving her, saying that she would have never moved into the apartment if she had known it was just a rental. I was honestly shocked, because in my mind, it wasn't like I'd kept some big secret from her. The topic just never came up. It wasn't like I sat her down and said, hey, by the way, we own this apartment. I just never thought it was that big of a deal because, like I said, I'd been living there so long, managing everything, it felt like my place. The more she yelled, the more I started getting frustrated. I told her, look, I didn't lie to you. You never asked, and I didn't think it mattered because we were living here just fine. But she wouldn't let it go. She kept bringing up how I'd hid this from her, how I made her think we were building a future together in this apartment we supposedly owned, and that now she felt like everything was a lie. I mean, I get why she was upset, sure, but at the same time, she was acting like I had masterminded this elaborate scheme to trick her. It wasn't like that at all. It just never came up. At that point, I think she was just mad at the whole situation, and the apartment thing was the last straw for her. She started demanding that I pay for the real estate appraisal she'd gotten done on the apartment, which was around 500 euros. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone spends money without asking me and then expects me to foot the bill, that's not how it works in my book. I told her, I didn't ask you to do that. You decided to get an appraisal without talking to me first, so that's on you. Melissa was furious. She kept yelling that I was an asshole, that I'd wasted her time, that I'd lied to her about everything. I was sitting there on the phone just taking it all in, thinking, is this really happening? She ended the call by calling me an a-hole one last time and hung up. But of course, she wasn't done. Nope. The next thing I knew, she was telling all of our friends how I'd lied to her throughout our entire marriage. She twisted the story to make it sound like I'd been keeping secrets from her for years, like I'd been pretending to own an apartment I didn't own just to keep her happy or something. Suddenly, our friend group was buzzing with messages and group chats, people taking sides, debating whether I was in the wrong or if she was overreacting. Some of our friends were sympathetic towards her, saying that I should have told her up front that it was a rental. Others, though, thought she was making a big deal out of nothing and that she should have asked more questions before assuming things. The whole situation turned into a mess, and I couldn't believe this was happening over something as simple as a misunderstanding about an apartment. I talked to my best friend about it, and he couldn't stop laughing. He said, dude, you've got to post this on Reddit. People are going to have a field day with this one. And so here I am, asking Reddit, am I the a-hole for not telling my ex-wife that we lived in a rental apartment? Update 1. So, after that call with Melissa, I thought maybe that was the end of it, like we'd both cool off and move on. But of course, I was wrong. She wasn't done with me yet, and neither was our friend's group chat. The whole situation blew up in there, and let me tell you, that group chat turned into a battleground real fast. I woke up the next day to my phone buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was just my alarm, but when I looked at it, there were about 30 unread messages, all from our mutual friend group. You know that feeling when you wake up, check your phone, and instantly know it's going to be a bad day? Yeah, that was me right then. I opened the group chat, and the first thing I saw was Melissa's long rant about how I'd lied to her during the entire marriage. She was going off, telling everyone how I had deceived her, kept secrets, and made her think we owned the apartment when, in reality, it was a rental. It wasn't just a few messages either. It was one of those long, multi-part texts that go on and on. I had to scroll through a wall of text just to get to the bottom of it. She had clearly been up all night stewing over it because the message read like a dramatic monologue. She was throwing around phrases like, "How could he do this to me?" And "I feel so betrayed." She even mentioned the real estate appraisal, telling everyone how she had spent 500 euros, only to find out the apartment wasn't even ours. Honestly, it was like reading a whole soap opera script. Anyway, as I scrolled through the messages, I saw that people had already started chiming in. Some of our friends were jumping in with supportive messages for her like, "Wow, I can't believe he never told you." And "That's so messed up, I'd be furious too." Others were more on my side, saying stuff like, "It's not like he was hiding it, it's just a rental, and I don't get why she assumed they owned it without asking." One of our friends, let's call her Jess, was the first one to try and calm things down. She sent a message saying, "Guys, maybe this is just a misunderstanding. Let's hear both sides before jumping to conclusions." But Melissa wasn't having any of it. She replied almost immediately with, "There's nothing to misunderstand. He lied by omission. He made me believe we owned that place when we didn't." That was when I decided to jump in. I didn't want to, but at this point, I had no choice. I wasn't about to just sit back and let everyone think I'd been this huge liar. So I typed out a response, keeping it as calm as possible considering the situation. I said something like, "Hey guys, just to clear things up, I didn't lie to Melissa. I never told her we owned the apartment, and honestly, it never came up. I've been renting this place for years and handling all the bills, so it just felt like home to me. I didn't think it was something I needed to explain, because to me, it didn't matter. If she had asked, I would have told her." I hit send and waited. The chat went quiet for a bit, and I thought maybe people were starting to see reason, but nope. Melissa fired back with, "You had every opportunity to tell me. We've talked about our future, about maybe renovating or starting a family, and not once did you mention that this wasn't our apartment. How was I supposed to know?" At this point, the chat was blowing up again, and more people started weighing in. It turned into this massive debate about whether I was in the wrong for not telling her, or if she should have asked more questions. My best friend, John, who had been pretty quiet up until now, finally jumped in. His message made me laugh, even though I probably shouldn't have been laughing in the middle of all this. He said, "Guys, let's be real here. Who honestly asks, 'Hey, do we own this apartment?' on a first date? If you're living together, you're probably more focused on figuring out what to have for dinner, not whether you're renting or owning." I was dying. John always had a way of cutting through the BS with his dry sense of humor, and it felt like the first time someone wasn't taking things too seriously. Melissa, of course, didn't find it funny. She snapped back at John, saying, "It's not about the first date, it's about trust in a marriage." At this point, the whole group chat was just turning into chaos. Everyone was talking over each other, and it was clear no one was going to agree on anything. Some people thought I should have been more upfront, while others thought Melissa was blowing things way out of proportion. There was one guy, let's call him Mark, who kept trying to play both sides, like, "Yeah, I can see why Melissa's upset, but I don't think OP meant to lie." It was the classic, let's all just get along approach, which wasn't really helping at all. Eventually, I decided I'd had enough. I sent one final message. "Look, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough about the apartment being a rental, but it was never my intention to hide anything. I thought we were happy living here, and I didn't think it mattered because I've always treated it like our home. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, and I'm sorry if I did." After that, I muted the chat. I couldn't deal with it anymore. It was turning into a back and forth that wasn't going to end well, no matter what I said. People had already picked their sides, and there wasn't much else I could do. Over the next couple of days, I heard bits and pieces about how the conversation had gone on even after I left. Some friends reached out to me privately to say they understood where I was coming from, while others just stayed quiet. Melissa didn't speak to me directly after that, which was probably for the best. I didn't see any point in dragging things out further. Looking back, I still don't think I did anything wrong, but I get why Melissa was upset. I guess, in her mind, the apartment represented something bigger, like security or stability, and finding out it was a rental probably felt like the rug was pulled out from under her. But at the end of the day, it was just an apartment, It didn't define us or our relationship, at least not to me. So, yeah, that's the group chat drama. It wasn't fun, but it gave me a good story to tell. And I guess in the grand scheme of things, if the worst thing I did in my marriage was not mention the apartment was a rental, then I can live with that. Update 2. After the whole apartment mess blew up in the group chat, I figured things would cool down for a while, right? Like, Melissa had said her piece, I'd tried to explain myself, and the group chat was officially a battlefield I wasn't going to step back into. But of course, that wasn't the end. Not even close. I think it was maybe 2 days after the group chat fiasco when Melissa decided to bring up the car. I should have seen it coming, honestly. Things had gone from who owns the apartment to who's getting what in the divorce pretty quickly. And when it comes to breakups, people love to talk about stuff. Who gets the TV? Who gets the couch? Who's taking the dog? Even though we didn't have one. So the car. I get this text from her in the middle of the day, completely out of nowhere. She was like, I'm taking the car when I move out, and you know it. And I was just sitting there, staring at my phone, thinking, wait, the car? Our car? I mean, technically, we'd both been using it, but it wasn't as simple as her just taking it. Here's the thing. The car wasn't actually ours. It was a lease. I had signed the lease, and we'd been making payments together, sure, but we didn't own it. We were both driving it, using it to get around. But at the end of the day, the car still belonged to the bank, and now she was acting like she could just walk off with it like it was her prize for putting up with me. So, I texted her back, trying to keep it civil. I said something like, hey, you know the car's a lease, right? It's not ours to split, it's the bank's. We still have payments left on it. I figured that would be the end of the conversation. Like, how do you argue with facts? But of course, Melissa wasn't the type to back down. She replied almost immediately with, I don't care if it's a lease, I'm the one who drives it the most. You barely use it, so it's basically mine. I'm taking it when I move out, and you'll figure out how to deal with the rest. Now, this is where things got tricky. Yeah, she had a point. I didn't drive the car as much as she did. I mostly used public transport or walked since I lived so close to everything. And Melissa definitely relied on the car more. But that didn't mean she could just claim it like that. We were both on the hook for the payments, and if she took the car and stopped paying, guess who would be left with the bill? That's right, me. At this point, I was frustrated. I didn't want to get into a fight about this, but I also wasn't about to let her just walk off with a leased car without figuring out who's responsible for the rest of the payments. So I called her. The second she answered, I could hear the tension in her voice. She didn't even say hello, just went straight into, you better not be calling to argue about the car. I sighed, trying to stay calm. Look, Melissa, I'm not trying to argue. I just want to figure this out. The car's a lease, and we still have payments left. If you take it, are you planning on covering the rest of the lease? She let out this exasperated sigh like I was being unreasonable. Why would I cover the whole lease? We got the car together. You should still pay your half even if I take it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She actually expected me to keep paying for a car I wouldn't even be driving. So, you want me to keep making payments on a car I don't have? How does that make any sense? She didn't even hesitate. Because it's your responsibility too. We got it together, remember? Just because I'm taking it doesn't mean you're off the hook. You need to help out with the payments. I was starting to lose my patience. Melissa, come on. If you take the car, it's yours. I'm not going to keep paying for something I don't have access to. That's not fair. There was a long pause, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she was going to see my side of things. But nope. She came back with, well, if you don't want to pay for the car, then I'll just give it back and let the bank deal with it. How about that? I couldn't believe it. She was basically threatening to dump the car and leave us both in a worse situation just because I didn't want to pay for her to drive it. That's not a solution, Melissa. If we give the car back, we're both going to have to deal with the penalties for breaking the lease. You really want to do that just to prove a point? She didn't answer right away, and I could tell she was thinking it over. Finally, she said, fine. What if we split the lease until it's up, and then I take it over completely? I considered it for a second. It wasn't a terrible idea, but it still didn't sit right with me. I wasn't sure if I could trust her to keep up with the payments once she took over, and if something went wrong, I'd still be tied to the lease. But at the same time, I didn't want to fight about this forever, so I agreed, sort of. All right, here's the deal, I said. We'll split the payments for now, but once you move out, the car's officially yours. You take over the payments completely, and I'll sign off on it. That's the only way this is going to work. There was another pause, and I could hear her thinking it over. Finally, she said, fine, but you better stick to your word. I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. I mean, we'd come to some sort of agreement, but it still felt like a lose-lose situation. I wasn't thrilled about splitting payments on a car I wasn't even using, but at least there was a plan to get out of it eventually. After that, things went quiet for a few days. I didn't hear much from Melissa, and for once, the group chat wasn't blowing up with drama. It seemed like the car situation was settled, for now at least. But knowing Melissa, I wasn't holding my breath. Update 3. So here's a fun twist I didn't see coming. Melissa found out about this Reddit post. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how she found it. Maybe one of our mutual friends snitched, or maybe she was just creeping through Reddit to see if I'd said anything about the whole situation. Either way, she found it, and she was not happy. I was chilling at home thinking things had finally calmed down when my phone started ringing. It was Melissa, and I had a feeling this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. I picked up, and before I could even say hello, she went off. "You need to delete that Reddit post right now," she snapped. "I can't believe you'd write about our divorce and make me look like the bad guy." I was caught off guard for a second. I mean, I wasn't really dragging her through the mud here. I was just telling my side of things. But I knew trying to explain that to her wasn't going to work, so I stayed calm and asked, "Why does it matter, Melissa? It's just a post and I didn't even mention your name. No one knows it's you." But she wasn't having any of it. "I don't care if no one knows it's me. You're making me sound like I'm some sort of villain, and I'm not going to stand for that. Take it down, or I'll make your life even more difficult." I couldn't help but roll my eyes at that. Honestly, at this point, what else could she do to make things more difficult? We were already arguing about the car, the apartment, and everything else under the sun, so I figured if she wanted to play this game, I could play too. "All right," I said, staying calm. "I'll delete the post, if you agree to pay me back for your share of the rent while you were living with me. Since I was covering everything while you were there." There was a pause. I could almost hear her fuming through the phone. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You want me to pay you back for the rent when we were married? You are such an a-hole." I didn't even get a chance to respond before she hung up. Just like that, the conversation was over. I sat there for a second, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. Was I really the bad guy for asking her to chip in for the rent? I mean, we were both living there, but I was the one handling everything. Bills, rent, all of it. It didn't seem unreasonable to me, but apparently, she thought otherwise. So, yeah, she called me an a-hole and ended the conversation. I guess that means the post stays up. Honestly, I don't see what the big deal is. It's not like I'm lying or making stuff up. I'm just sharing what happened. And if she's mad about it, well, that's not really my problem anymore. I'm an 18-year-old who essentially came into this world against all odds. My biological mom, a wealthy woman with a firm plan that originally didn't include kids or marriage, met my dad under casual circumstances. They connected at a work event, shared similar job types but worked in different locations, and decided to start seeing each other. Despite precautions, a trifecta of birth control methods, I happened. My existence was a surprise, a statistical improbability that upended more than one life. When she found out she was pregnant, my bio-mom planned not to keep me. But my dad, who was secretly married and facing near impossible odds of having children with his wife, persuaded her to continue the pregnancy under the condition that he would take full responsibility post-birth. This agreement included a complete handoff to my dad. No parenting, no visitation, just child support. Growing up, I was raised under the illusion that I was the biological child of my dad and his wife, my stepmom. This illusion shattered when they had a miracle baby, a boy, my brother, who became the apple of their eye. It was clear from my earliest memories that I was a secondary consideration, part of the family by circumstance rather than by choice. As I grew older, the dynamics within our home grew more strained. Family gatherings, holidays, even casual dinners often highlighted my outsider status. I would be present, but not included, asked to take photos rather than be in them, a subtle but clear message of my place in the hierarchy. The situation only worsened when my siblings were born. I watched, sidelined, as they received the warmth and acceptance that was never extended to me. At 13, a pivotal year, I met my biological grandmother by chance. Discovering she had a granddaughter she'd never known about, she reached out, and we formed an instant connection. She offered me something I hadn't truly experienced: unconditional acceptance. When I decided to move in with her, my dad and stepmom readily agreed, almost relieved to simplify their family picture. Years passed, and I began to carve out a life with my grandmother, one where I felt valued and seen. Then, unexpectedly, my bio-mom passed away, leaving me her entire estate with the stipulation that I pursue a business degree. This inheritance was not just substantial, it was transformative. Overnight, I shifted from worrying about college tuition and student loans to navigating wealth management and estate planning. Yet, just as I was adjusting to this new reality, my dad and stepmom re-entered the picture, suddenly very interested in my finances. They argued that since they raised me for 13 years, I should contribute to my brother's education, specifically his aspiration to attend an Ivy League college. This put me in a painful position. On one hand, I understand the role they played in my life, however complicated. On the other, this inheritance from my bio mom feels like a final message, a gesture meant to secure my future and honor her wishes. Now, I find myself at a crossroads, weighing my desire to honor my bio mom's intentions against the guilt and pressure from my dad and stepmom. Sharing the wealth could ease some familial tensions, but it could also feel like betraying the last wishes of a woman who, in her own way, tried to make amends for a past decision. As I ponder these choices, I realize this isn't just about money. It's about loyalty, about recognizing where my obligations truly lie, and about establishing boundaries that respect both my future and my past. This is about more than just being fair. It's about being true to myself and the legacies of those who have shaped my life, for better or worse. This decision will undoubtedly shape my future relationships and my sense of self as I step further into adulthood and independence. So am I the a-hole if I don't share the money? Now for the top comments, the short answer is no. You wouldn't be the a-hole if you don't want to share it. That is your money. And let's face it, they don't deserve anything. Sure, they raised you for 13 years, but I'm pretty sure that if they could have gotten rid of you before that after their son was born, they would have. So on that note, no, absolutely not. You do not have to share your money with them. Now, taking into account that you say that you love your brother dearly, and he has never treated you any differently, and also that money is no longer an object for you. Maybe you could help him out, but leaving your parents out of the process. And what I mean by this is that if you do want to help him out, then you pay for the university. Don't pass the money to them for them to pay. You do it directly. And what do you guys think? Update 1. So, as you all know from my last post, I was gearing up for a crucial meeting with the lawyer and trustee handling my biological mom's estate. They laid everything out on the table, explaining all the ins and outs of her will and what that meant for me. It turns out my mom was incredibly specific about the conditions of the inheritance. I absolutely have to go to business school and complete my degree to claim and fully control the inheritance. This detail is super important because it essentially ties my hands when it comes to financial decisions, especially concerning sharing any wealth with my dad and stepmom. Thanks to a lot of reflection and some solid advice from all of you, I've come to see that I really don't have any moral obligation to support my dad and stepmom financially. Your insights and support helped me realize that my responsibility is to honor my mom's wishes and look out for my own future first. But the plot thickens with my brother. We had a deep and honest conversation about what he really wants for his future. Turns out he's not interested in the Ivy League route at all. His passion lies in the arts, and he's been dreaming of going to art school. The problem? My stepmom outright refused to support that dream. She has this fixed idea that a career in the arts isn't viable and pushed for something more traditionally prestigious or lucrative. Seeing his disappointment, I made him an offer. Once I'm done with my business degree, I'd be more than willing to help fund his education in art school. He was really touched by the offer and immediately accepted. Full of excitement, he shared the news with our dad, expecting perhaps some understanding, if not support. Unfortunately, the reaction was the exact opposite. My dad and stepmom were furious. They've always had this picture in their mind of him going into a field like law or medicine, something that, in their eyes, guarantees a hefty paycheck, and in turn a way to support them in the future. When my brother stood his ground and insisted on pursuing his true passion, it led to a massive blowout. The argument escalated to the point where my brother decided he couldn't live in such a restrictive and unsupportive environment anymore. He's 18, legally an adult, but the decision to move out was huge. He didn't have a concrete plan, so I stepped in. There was no way I was going to let him struggle on his own, or worse, end up with nowhere to stay. He's now living with me. It's a big adjustment having him here all the time, but it feels right. I've been helping him get to and from school and balancing that with my work until I can get my business school registration sorted out. It's a lot to manage, but it's worth it to see him more at peace and excited about his future. In the midst of all this, I've been reflecting a lot on what family means and how to best support the people you care about. It's not just about giving money or making sure they follow a path you think is best for them. It's about listening, understanding, and empowering them to make choices that truly reflect who they are. Thanks again to everyone who took the time to comment and offer advice. It's made a huge difference knowing there are people out there who care enough to share their thoughts and support. Here's to hoping that both my brother and I can forge paths that make us happy and proud. And here's to navigating the ups and downs of life with a little help from friends and a lot of personal resolve. Now for the top comments before the update. Wow, OP, this is a major twist. Your parents lost their miracle baby now, and he's actually going to live with you. I think it's great that you want to help him out, and it serves your parents' rights for being A to themselves. So, Opie, he is wishing you and your brother all the best in the upcoming future so that you can go to business school, finish it, and then help your brother out. And good riddance to your parents. Update 2. Since the last time I posted, things have gotten pretty wild with my family situation, and a lot has happened. I appreciate all your advice and support. It's been super helpful in navigating this mess. So let's dive into the latest chapter of this saga. After my last post, the pressure from my dad and stepmom didn't let up. They doubled down. They called me again, even more insistently this time, demanding that I give them half of my inheritance to support my brother's education and their own financial needs. This got me really frustrated. I snapped and told them off, explaining that even if I wanted to help, my hands were tied because of the stipulations in my biological mom's will. They didn't buy it and accused me of lying, which really ticked me off. Fed up with the accusations, I decided to get some legal backup. I met with my lawyer and the trustee handling my biological mom's estate to discuss everything in detail. They confirmed that my hands were indeed tied. The will explicitly stated that I need to complete my business degree before I can fully access and control the inheritance. Armed with this information, I called my dad back to lay out the facts, hoping it would help him understand the situation better. Unfortunately, the conversation went south, fast. He accused me of hiding behind legal excuses to avoid helping the family. That stung, but I held my ground, sticking to the facts and reiterating my commitment to honoring my biological mom's wishes. Just when I thought everyone in my family was against me, my brother came through. He called me up after overhearing my conversation with our dad and expressed his support for my decision. He was really upset about how our parents were treating me and made it clear he didn't agree with them. Knowing he was on my side was a huge relief and really helped me feel less alone in all this. With all the drama at home, I threw myself into my studies. I officially started business school and have been loving it. The courses are challenging but super interesting, and they've been a great distraction from the family issues. Plus, I feel more empowered knowing I'm gaining the knowledge to manage my inheritance responsibly once I graduate. The family tensions weren't just affecting me, they were hitting my brother hard too. He's been struggling with our parents' constant pressure and criticism, especially about his future plans. It's been an adjustment having him live with me full time, but honestly, it's been really good. We've been supporting each other, and it's brought us a lot closer. Having my brother around has been a mix of fun and challenging. We've set up a little study area where we both can work on our stuff. He's really into art, so he sketches while I hit the books. We cook meals together, and in the evenings, we've been binge-watching shows or talking about life. It's kind of nice having him around. It feels like we're building our own little team. As for the future, it's still a bit murky. My relationship with my parents is on shaky ground. I hope they'll come to understand why I've made the choices I have and that we can find a way to mend things. But for now, I'm focusing on my studies, supporting my brother, and just trying to build a stable, happy life for us both. I can't say enough how much I appreciate all of you here. Your comments and messages have been a lifeline during some really tough times. I'll keep you updated on how things progress with school, life with my brother, and everything else. Here's to overcoming challenges and making the best out of the hand we're dealt. Thanks for being part of my journey. Update 3. So here I am, deep into my business school grind, juggling assignments like a circus act, when out of nowhere I get this call from my dad. I thought maybe he just wanted to catch up or something, but oh boy, was I wrong. Dad: hey, we've been thinking, and we believe it's time for you to start taking on some family responsibilities. Me: okay, I'm managing mom's estate and focusing on school. What more do I need to do? Dad: well, your stepmom and I are planning to buy a new house, and we think you should contribute. Actually, we expect you to cover half the cost. My jaw hit the floor. Half the cost of a house? Just like that? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Me: Dad, I'm a student. How do you expect me to afford that? Plus, you know I can't touch the inheritance until I finish my degree. Dad: that's your problem. You need to figure it out. You owe us. The call ended pretty much there, with me in total disbelief. The level of entitlement was just, wow. Still reeling from the call, I reached out to my lawyer and a couple of close buddies to get their take and some advice. Everyone agreed it was an unreasonable ask and reassured me that I was right to feel blindsided. My lawyer confirmed again that the conditions of the will were clear and legally binding. I couldn't use the money even if I wanted to. Knowing I needed to address this head-on, I set up a meeting with my parents at a local coffee shop, a neutral place where hopefully we could talk things out more calmly. The conversation was intense and emotional. Me. I need to understand why you think it's reasonable to ask me to pay for half of your new house. Dad. Because we raised you. It's only fair you help us out now that you have the means. Me. But I literally don't have the means. The money is locked up until I graduate. Besides, that's not how family should work. You don't just raise a kid expecting payback like this. Stepmom. You're just being selfish. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us? We went back and forth like this for a while, but it was clear they weren't really listening. They were more interested in what they could get out of me. After the heated coffee shop meetup, I knew I had to lay down some firm boundaries. Me. Look, I'm focusing on my future right now, and I will not be pressured into jeopardizing my finances by breaking the terms of my inheritance. I'm not going to pay for your house or anything else like that. I need to be responsible with this money for my own future. It was super tough to stand my ground like that, especially with family. They were pretty upset, my dad especially, but I knew I had to stick to my guns for my own good. So, yeah, the situation with my parents is pretty tense right now. I'm not sure how things are going to evolve from here, but I'm prepared for it to be a bit rocky for a while. Meanwhile, I'm throwing myself into my studies and planning for a future where I make my own decisions about my life and my money. Thanks a ton to everyone here for your support and advice through all this. It's been so helpful to have a place to vent and get feedback. I'll keep you all posted on any new developments. Fingers crossed for less drama and more peace moving forward. Here's to staying strong and making choices that are right for us. Update 4. So, after I stood my ground about not paying for half of their new house, I thought my parents might back off a bit. But nope, they came back with an even more outrageous request. I was just getting home from class when my phone rang. It was my dad again. Dad, we need to talk. Me, sighing. What now? Dad, your stepmom and I have been talking, and we think it's only fair that you give us a monthly allowance. Me, what? A monthly allowance? Are you serious? Dad, yes, you're going to have all this money soon. It's not unreasonable for you to help out your family regularly. I was stunned. They weren't backing down, they were doubling down. Completely overwhelmed, I reached out to my lawyer again to explain the new demand. She reassured me that legally, my parents had no right to any of the inheritance, and that I was under no obligation to give them money, especially not a monthly allowance. I also talked to my brother about it. He was just as shocked and angry as I was. He told me he couldn't believe how entitled our parents were acting, and that he supported me 100%. I decided to have another sit down with my parents, but this time, I brought my lawyer along for backup. We met at their house, and it was clear from the start that things were going to be tense. Dad, noticing my lawyer, why did you bring her? Me, because I want to make sure we're all clear on what's legal and what's not. Lawyer, calmly. Mr. and Mrs., last name, your son is under no legal obligation to provide you with an allowance or any other financial support. The terms of the inheritance are clear, and until he completes his degree, the money is not accessible for discretionary spending. Stepmom, angrily. So you're just going to leave us struggling while you sit on a fortune? Me. I'm not sitting on anything. I'm following the rules set out in the will, and honestly, this constant pressure isn't helping anyone. I need to focus on my education and my future. The meeting ended with my parents furious, and my lawyer and I leaving with a sense of grim satisfaction. It felt good to have backup, but it also felt terrible to see just how far my parents were willing to go for money. A few days after the meeting, things took another turn for the worse. I was studying when I got a series of texts from my brother. He had overheard our parents talking about hiring a lawyer to try and contest the will, claiming that I wasn't fit to manage the inheritance. Brother, they're talking about saying you're irresponsible and not capable of handling the money. It's ridiculous. Me, are you serious? They can't actually do that, can they? Brother, I don't know, but it sounds like they're serious about it. I contacted my lawyer immediately and explained the situation. She assured me that contesting the will on those grounds would be extremely difficult, especially since I'm already in business school and managing my responsibilities well. However, we needed to be prepared for anything. We started gathering all the documentation to show that I was following the terms of the will and handling everything responsibly. This included my school records, the estate's financial statements, and even character references from my professors and friends. Throughout all this, my brother has been a rock. He's been supportive, helping me with everything from gathering documents to just being there when I needed to vent. We've grown even closer through this mess, and having him on my side has been invaluable. We've been continuing to live together, and it's been a big adjustment, but also a positive one. We've set up a good routine, balancing our schoolwork and making sure we're both taking care of ourselves. It feels like we're building a new, stronger family unit, just the two of us. Right now, we're in a bit of a holding pattern, waiting to see if my parents actually follow through with their threats to contest the will. It's stressful, but I'm focusing on my studies and trying to keep things as normal as possible. I've also started thinking about what life will look like once I finish my degree and gain full control of the inheritance. I want to make sure I use the money wisely and in a way that honors my biological mom's wishes. This whole experience has been a massive learning curve. I've learned a lot about standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and the importance of having a strong support system. It's been tough, but I feel like I'm coming out of this stronger and more determined to create a better future for myself and my brother. Thank you all for your continued support and advice. Your words have been a huge help in navigating this craziness. I'll keep you updated on what happens next. Here's to hoping for some peace and stability in the near future. Update 5. So after I told my parents I wouldn't give them money, they actually went ahead and hired a lawyer to contest my inheritance. They were trying to argue that I wasn't capable of handling the money and wanted control over it themselves. I couldn't believe it was happening. I talked to my lawyer, and she reassured me that their case was weak, but we still needed to be prepared. We gathered all the evidence we could, my school records, financial statements, and even character references from my professors and friends. It was a lot of work, but I felt confident that we were ready to defend my position. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I was super nervous. My parents were there with their lawyer, and I had mine by my side. The judge listened to both sides. My parents' lawyer tried to make me look like an irresponsible teenager who couldn't manage money, but we had a strong case. When it was our turn, my lawyer presented all the evidence. She showed the judge my excellent grades, how I was responsibly handling the estate's finances, and even brought in a couple of my professors who testified to my maturity and dedication. After a long and tense session, the judge finally made a ruling. He dismissed my parents' case, stating that I was clearly capable of managing the inheritance and that there was no legal basis for their claims. It was a huge relief. My parents were furious with the judge's decision. They stormed out of the courtroom without even looking at me. It was a bittersweet victory. I was glad the case was dismissed, but it hurt to see my parents acting like this. A few days after the court hearing, I got an unexpected visit. It was my dad, but he was alone this time. He looked exhausted and defeated. Dad, sighing, "Can we talk?" Me, warily, "Okay, what's going on?" Dad, "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the hearing. I realize we've been wrong pushing you like this. It's hard for us to accept everything that's happened." Me, surprised, "You think?" Dad, "I know we've put you through a lot and I'm sorry. Your stepmom and we've been under a lot of stress, but that's no excuse for what we've done. We talked for a long time. He explained that he and my stepmom were facing financial difficulties and were desperate. They saw my inheritance as a way out, but they didn't realize the harm they were causing me. He apologized sincerely, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like he was being genuine." Me, "I appreciate you saying that, but it's going to take time to rebuild trust. You can't just expect everything to go back to normal overnight." Dad, "I understand. I just hope we can start somewhere." After our talk, I agreed to have a family meeting with both my dad and stepmom. It was tense, but necessary. We laid everything out on the table, our feelings, our frustrations, and our hopes for the future. My stepmom apologized too, and while I'm still wary, it felt like a step in the right direction. Throughout all this, my brother has been my rock. Living together has brought us closer, and we've been able to support each other in ways we never did before. We've got a good routine going, balancing our schoolwork and life. It feels like we're creating our own little family unit, and it's been a bright spot amidst all the chaos. With the legal battle behind me and a tentative truce with my parents, I'm focusing on my future. I'm working hard in business school, planning for the day I can fully control my inheritance. I want to honor my biological mom's wishes and use the money wisely, maybe even start a business of my own. Just when I thought things were finally calming down, I got a surprise call. It was from my biological mom's lawyer. He had found some old letters and documents from my mom that she wanted me to have once I turned 18. He asked if he could come by and drop them off. I was curious and agreed. The lawyer arrived a few days later with a box full of letters and documents. I spent hours reading through them. There were letters from my mom talking about her hopes and dreams for me, her regrets about not being in my life, and advice for the future. It was overwhelming but also incredibly comforting. It felt like she was reaching out to me from the past, trying to guide me. This whole experience has taught me so much about resilience, boundaries, and the importance of having a strong support system. It's been tough, but I feel like I'm coming out of this stronger and more determined to create a better future for myself and my brother. Thank you all for your unwavering support and advice. Your encouragement has been a beacon of light through some of the darkest times. I'll keep you updated on how things progress. Here's to hoping for more stability, peace, and happiness moving forward. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm focusing on my education, rebuilding trust with my family, and making sure my brother and I have a stable and happy life. It's been a crazy journey, but I'm hopeful for what the future holds. Thanks again, everyone, for sticking with me through all of this. Your support means the world to me, and I'll be sure to keep you posted on any new developments. Here's to brighter days ahead. Update 6. Hey everyone, it's time for what I think will be the final update. After all the ups and downs, twists and turns, I'm finally at a place where things are starting to settle down and look brighter. Here's what's happened since my last post. This is going to be a long one, so grab some snacks and get comfy. After my dad's sincere apology, we started the long process of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, and it definitely didn't happen overnight. We had a lot of deep conversations, some arguments, and plenty of moments where it felt like we were making progress and then sliding back. But over time, we started to understand each other better. Me, during one of our talks. I need you to understand how hurtful it was when you and stepmom tried to take my inheritance. It felt like you were valuing money over our relationship. Dad, I get that now. We were desperate and scared about our future. It doesn't excuse what we did, but I want you to know we regret it deeply. Me. It's going to take time to rebuild trust. You can't just expect everything to go back to normal overnight. Dad, I understand. I just hope we can start somewhere. We took things slow, meeting up regularly to talk and spend time together. Sometimes we would just go for a walk or grab a coffee. Other times we would sit down and really dig into our feelings and frustrations. It was hard, but it felt like we were making real progress. Meanwhile, my brother and I continued to grow closer. Living together has been a great experience. We've developed a solid routine, balancing school, work, and downtime. We've even started a few projects together, like fixing up our apartment and planning a trip for when things settle down. Brother, while painting a wall. You know, I think we've done pretty well for ourselves, all things considered. Me, laughing. Yeah, who knew we'd make such a good team? We turned our apartment into a cozy and inviting space filled with personal touches that made it feel like home. We hung up some of my brother's artwork on the walls, and I set up a small office area where I could focus on my studies. It felt good to create a space that was entirely our own. Business school has been intense but rewarding. I'm learning so much and feeling more confident about managing my inheritance and planning for my future. The letters from my biological mom have been a source of inspiration and guidance. She had so much wisdom and love to share, even from afar. One of my favorite letters was one she wrote when she first found out she was pregnant. She talked about her hopes and dreams for me, and how much she wanted me to have a happy and successful life. It made me feel connected to her in a way I never had before. A heart-to-heart with my stepmom. One of the biggest challenges was mending my relationship with my stepmom. She had been the most aggressive about the money, and it took a lot for me to even want to talk to her. But eventually, we had a heart-to-heart. Stepmom, tearfully, I've been so wrong. I was blinded by our financial struggles and fear. I never meant to hurt you like this. Me, I appreciate you saying that. It's going to take time, but I'm willing to try and move past this if you are. Stepmom, I understand. I just want us to be a family again. We started meeting up for coffee and chatting about everyday things, slowly rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't always easy, but it felt good to be making progress. We talked about our feelings and frustrations, and slowly, we started to understand each other better. With the legal battles and family drama behind me, I'm looking ahead. I'm focusing on finishing my degree and then taking full control of my inheritance. I've started drafting a business plan for a company I want to start, something that aligns with my passions and honors my biological mom's legacy. I've been meeting with mentors and advisors, getting their input on my business ideas. It's been exciting to think about the future and what I can achieve. I feel like I'm on the right path, and I'm determined to make the most of this opportunity. Just when I thought I had uncovered everything, I received another surprise. My biological mom's lawyer found a journal she had kept during her pregnancy. Reading through her thoughts and feelings brought me even closer to her. It was like having a conversation with her, learning about her hopes, fears, and dreams for me. One entry that really stood out was when she talked about feeling scared and unsure about becoming a mother, but also incredibly hopeful and excited about the future. It made me realize just how much she cared about me, even before I was born. My grandmother's support has been a huge relief. It's good to know that there's someone else in my corner. With her backing, I feel even more determined to finish my degree and take full control of my future. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm focusing on my education, rebuilding trust with my family, and making sure my brother and I have a stable and happy life. It's been a crazy journey, but I'm hopeful for what the future holds. This whole experience has taught me so much about resilience, boundaries, and the importance of having a strong support system. It hasn't been easy, but I feel stronger and more prepared for whatever comes next. I'm grateful for the support from this community. You all have been a lifeline during some of the toughest times. Unwavering support and advice. Your encouragement has been a beacon of light through some of the darkest times. I'll keep you updated on how things progress. Here's to hoping for more stability, peace, and happiness moving forward. Thanks again, everyone, for sticking with me through all of this. Your support means the world to me, and I'll be sure to keep you posted on any new developments. Here's to brighter days ahead.